everybody, and welcome to the Gaming Mix podcast, your official podcast from Analog Stick Gaming, which I am now part of. My name is Jordan, if you don't know me, and to my left is the founder of Analog Stick Gaming, Jeff Young. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing quite well. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm not ill anymore. As you'll remember, we missed a week because I had a bad illness, and then our schedules are just weird because if you haven't watched our previous episodes, as we sort of explained, we're aiming to be every week here on this podcast, but because I'm in the UK and Jeff's in Canada, sometimes things can be hard to line up. For example, it's actually an hour earlier for our recording time for me today, and it's the same time for Jeff because Canada haven't changed their clocks yet. So there we go.
Oh, we're rebels to the very end.
But we've got an interesting episode today, Jeff, because obviously we're going to be going through some news, and not all of it is very good. In fact,
I think all of it is not very good.
Yeah,
It kind of hits all in different areas.
yes,
But
um,
yeah, it's
it's been a bit of a bad week for the industry, shall we say? But we'll get into that in a minute. Jeff, I do want to, as you know, we're trying to still figure out this format and everything. So, any feedback you want to leave in the comments, please do that. Because look, we want to make this show something that people want to watch and engage with. But I'm gonna flip up our format a little bit, Jeff, and I want to ask you: is there anything that you, obviously we're both reviewers, is there any reviews you've written recently that you want to push people towards, or is there anything that you've been playing recently that you specifically want to shout out now at the start of the show before we might lose some people later on?
I mean, there's a few games. Let me cycle down the document here. Yeah, like by the time that this podcast goes live on YouTube, I'll have a couple reviews out. Because I'm going to be putting out the Spider-Man 2 review is going to be going out today. My review for my time at Sandrock is going to go out today. Um, I've got my review for Achilles Legends Untold that's going out tomorrow. And then I've also got on Friday my review, which depending on when this goes live, my review for DreamWorks All-Star Kart Racing. That will be up on Friday.
Well, we'll make
Um,
sure that we've timed this episode so that these reviews that Jeff is speaking about will be up by the time you're seeing this episode. I'll make sure that we delay it slightly if necessary because we don't have a specific upload schedule right now, but that sort of works in our favour because here's an announcement for you. We're actually filming another episode a few days from now, so you're going to get two episodes a little bit closer together than you normally would because we felt like making up for that week that we missed. And you might not at the moment. Our plan for the next episode is to do a Alan Wake 2 focused episode because we are both playing it, and I'm going to be the lead reviewer for us on that, but Jeff has actually played more of it than me at the moment, so we're going to kind of wait until I can play a bit more, and hopefully Jeff might have finished the game by then as well. So you won't hear any Alan Wake 2 discussions today. So sorry for that, but come back next episode, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, following us on social media, all that good stuff. Jeff's a madman who writes many reviews every single week. I, in the last 12 days or so, have written about three, I believe, and I will have another review coming out tomorrow. So by the time you're seeing this episode, I will have written 4 reviews in 2 weeks, which for me is quite a lot. Jeff does 4 reviews in a week, but I obviously have
Sometimes.
had to catch up on myself. So if you head over to Outer Haven, for example, you'll see my review for Assassin's Creed Mirage, and I also most recently reviewed EA Sports UFC 5, if that's your kind of thing. And then for us, for Analog Stick Gaming, the other day I just put out my Forza Motorsport review. Because look, we are a smaller outlet, so we don't always get access to games, but we will review them after they come out if necessary, as long as we can afford them or find a way to access them that is, affordable for us. I recommend going and reading that review. I don't know about Jeff. Jeff checked it over, but I'm pretty proud of that review. I think it's one of my best written reviews yet. Because, if you don't know, I've only been writing reviews for about a year and a half, so this is kind of a new skill for me, something that I am still learning. But, if racing sims are your thing, I think that Forza Motorsport is a very impressive one. And it's one that I plan to continue playing for years to come, in stages and that kind of thing. So go and read and find out why. Because I really, really do recommend reading that one. And it's not just because I wrote it, I just think it's a good review. So, other than that, I, weirdly, I haven't actually played that much. Because, as I mentioned before, I was ill a couple of weeks ago. And then I've kind of had to catch up on myself. The only other thing that I have been playing is, and this is a very European game, so I forgive, please forgive me for a second if you're part of kind of our most likely North American audience, but I've been playing Football Manager, which is obviously, or soccer as some people would call it, which is obviously a very big PC game, but has been on consoles recently and is launching onto Game Pass day one on both PC and Xbox. The console version is different, so I've been playing the PC version. There are differences between those two versions, but I will have a review out for Football Manager on Outer Haven by the time you're seeing this episode. What I would say is, if you're a Football Manager player, this game it's not massively different, but the changes that it does make a huge difference to what you're able to do in the game. So, for anyone who's played it before, you have the original mode, which is you will go in and you'll manage a team, and when you start your save, you will have all the players that team has in real life at that moment in time, okay? What they've now added is 2 alternative ways to play. And one of those is real world mode, which basically means any transfers between teams and transfers of players to other teams won't happen in your save file if you choose real world mode until the date that they actually happened in real life. So, as you play this game months into the future, let's say that in January, somebody like, I don't know, Lionel Messi leaves Miami and goes somewhere else. If you choose real world mode, that won't happen until that date in the save. But if you choose original mode and you're doing a save after that date, he will actually be at that new team earlier in the save before he would have been in real life. So it's kind of a way to make a very realistic sim heavy game more realistic and representative of real life. And then the other one, which is perhaps most interesting, is it's called Your World. And what this allows you to do is, let's say that your team this year made some transfers that you weren't happy with, or they sold players that you didn't want them to sell. You are able to basically start at the start of the transfer window in the summer, of which happened a few months ago, and the squads for the clubs will be as they were at that point in time, with no future transfers already agreed, so you can then basically rewrite history. So let's say that you're managing Tottenham Hotspur here in England and you don't want to sell Harry Kane to Bayern Munich. You don't have to do that if you're in your world mode. So they're kind of giving you different ways to play the game, which for me add to the longevity of the game, because really the problem with original mode is that after you've done a couple of saves with different teams and stuff, you end up doing the same thing, because you buy the same players, and certain players you're never able to buy because they're at a certain team that they don't ever want to leave, and that kind of thing. But things like real world mode, and especially your world mode, allow you more opportunity to do exciting things. So yeah, for fans of that kind of management sim, football / soccer game, this is an improvement on the last game. But I think that, it's not necessarily the biggest improvement in the world. So it does sort of fall into that trap of other sports games where, they're about iteration. I think that part of it as well, though, is Sports Interactive, who make these titles, they have basically announced that in in Football Manager 2025, which will be released in 2024, they're actually moving the game to a different engine. I believe, quite interestingly, given the news last week, I believe that they're actually moving it to Unity, which is an interesting choice. But what they've essentially said is that next year's game is almost going to be a reboot of sorts with quite massive differences, and that's kind of the way they're putting it across. And I think that maybe that's why this year you're not seeing as many changes as you maybe have done in the past. However, like I said, I want to be very clear, the changes that are there are really meaningful ones that actually make a big difference to how you can play the game. So it does a better job than something like EA UFC 5, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars and said that if you owned UFC 4, you don't necessarily need to even buy UFC 5. So yeah, it's such a weird one. I know that, Jeff, you're not one for sports games necessarily, but
not to like sink a lot of time into it. Like I'll pop on like NHL and play a game or something, but that's about it.
but what I was gonna say is, for me, they're actually the hardest games to review, and this is a bit about the review process and things like that. But it's like, how would you approach? I'm interested in this, Jeff, and other people might be as well. But how do you approach a yearly franchise game that doesn't change much when it comes to a review? Because let's say that one year you give a yearly franchise game an 8 out of 10, right? And then the next year it's not really any worse, it just hasn't changed much. Do you score it the same score? Do you score it lower because it hasn't changed? Like, what is your approach to that kind of thing?
I mean, yeah, kind of each game needs to be kind of taken in its own its own merits, really. But I mean, yeah, like if it's a yearly thing where you're expecting a similar thing, uh, like the NHL games or something like that, like a lot of those games, they just like they iterate, they don't innovate because like they just kind of play it same with like Call of Duty and stuff like that. Like the multiplayer experiences are generally the same thing. They'll change like how streaks and kill streaks and all that kind of stuff work out,
You
and sometimes they
you
bring back
bringing
the
up
same maps.
you bringing up Call of Duty gives me a a thing that I want to say, because somebody had actually asked me on Twitter the other day, basically, would we be reviewing it? The answer is, if I pick the game up, I will do a review for it. I know that by the time you're seeing this episode, the early access for the campaign will already be available. I just don't know yet whether I'm picking the game up or not, because Call of Duty is kind of... I like it, don't get me wrong. I've always liked Call of Duty. But it's got to the point now where it is one of those games that I'm not sure I need to get, certainly straight away. So what I would say is, a review will come at some point for Call of Duty. It just might not be immediately around release time.
Yeah, I didn't even beat the last one. I got like a couple missions in and stuff, but I just bounced off that one.
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
don't know why.
That's definitely fair. So without further ado, Jeff, why don't we start getting through the news? And I think that we should probably deal with the Microsoft and Xbox news first.
Sure.
Because they've made a bit of a strange decision in the last few days, and there has been some clarification since then, which we'll get into. But what have they done, Jeff?
Sure. Actually, just before that, are we still doing games we're playing after?
Yeah. If you still have stuff you're playing, this is what I mean, people. Jeff plays a lot of stuff, so yes, we will.
Oh yeah,
still
because you were just saying like what reviews I have.
Yes, yeah, we will
Not
still
really what
do.
I've been
We
playing.
will still do games we've been playing at the end. I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure we had some reviews out there, because people had been asking me about kind of getting our reviews into the show, and I want to make sure people know what we've done, and because I've done so many recently as well, it just felt like a good position to put it straight at the top.
Sounds good. Yeah, so this one's sort of weird. So Xbox has a new policy, and some people have been getting a 0x82 error. And basically, it's them kind of saying goodbye to some unofficial accessories. Uh, so these hit points come from Windows Central. So definitely check out their review, their news piece on it. So from November 12th this year, Microsoft will no longer allow unauthorized third-party accessories to be used with its Xbox consoles. So players are reporting a warning message displaying on Xbox when plugging in an unauthorized accessory, noting them that the date that their accessories will be blocked with that 0x82D60002 error. Xbox advises returning the accessories, which that's a dumb excuse, and instead referring to its list of authorized products on its website. The message is shown due to the latest console build, which is said to be causing console issues when using third-party accessories. So they've had a couple updates on this article. They've heard from sources familiar with Microsoft's plans that this may be related to Microsoft expanding its program for approved third-party wireless Xbox controllers. Most Xbox third-party controllers right now are wired. And Microsoft has responded to questions for clarification about this new policy. So Microsoft has further clarified that users who connect USB devices through the Xbox adaptive controller for accessory purposes will not be impacted by the new restrictions, which is fine.
Can I just say?
So
Can I just say about that before we move on?
yeah,
Thank God, because this decision, in some cases, would have killed accessibility on Xbox. For example, on our old podcast, the Game for All show, I had the pleasure of interviewing someone called Spencer Allen, who is a player that had very specific needs, and he actually designed his own controller and made it, and it worked with the console, no problem. But obviously, he doesn't have the funds to get his thing, certified and authorized as an official product, because this costs money to do. Like, yeah, okay, any company and any product can technically go through this certification process
Yeah.
and therefore be an official licensed third party product, avoiding this problem entirely. The problem is that process costs a lot of money, and for smaller businesses or people like Spencer Allen who have to make their own very specific controller in order to play games, if he wasn't able to use his controller anymore, like, do you see what I mean?
Mm.
It could have created a massive issue. So at least in accessibility terms, they have done the right thing, I would say, in that as long as you're using the accessible controller to connect your stuff that you need to the Xbox, you're not going to have any issue with that. So that's a good thing, I would say. However, as we get into it, this overall thing is just weird.
Yeah. So Windows Central goes on to saying, why is Microsoft doing this? So it says their sources indicate that Microsoft is lifting restrictions on the ability for third-party hardware manufacturers to build wireless accessories for Xbox X and S devices. Indeed, so this year we saw Power A Moga XP Ultra launch, which is among the first official third-party wireless controllers that isn't simply a reskinned Xbox standard controller or patent holder, such as some of the Scuff accessories. So, like Scuff helped made some of the Elite controller stuff, so they had rights to a lot of that stuff. So excellent Xbox controllers like the Razer Wolverine V2 Chroma are let down solely by the fact that they are wired. So Microsoft has previously had no easy path for third-party manufacturers to get wireless into their controllers, with only headsets getting approval via a special Microsoft security chip. Now we're hearing that Microsoft does have an approval process for official third-party wireless controllers, and this new restriction may be a result of security measures to put restrictions on inputs that could circumvent play or inject unfair advantages. The downside, of course, is that Microsoft's Xbox new policy is affecting many fair accessories, particularly the case of fighting game joysticks and other accessories. So, Maximilian Dude, who is a huge proponent of the FGC, he is constantly a proponent of making sure that fighting game stuff is known well. I mean, he hosts a fighting game podcast with
Go
Justin
and check
Wong,
out his podcast and his
um,
YouTube channel in general, by the way, because he's brilliant.
yeah, his Twitch stuff is fantastic. He is one of the most educated people on the planet for it. He tweeted out, he goes, "Hey, Xbox P3 and Xbox and Matt Booty, this is essentially a death sentence for the local fighting game events that run on Xbox, much less others that can only afford one arcade stick. The Brook Gaming fans converters are not cheap devices. They are a huge boon to FGC. Please reconsider." Um, so yeah, like that's the thing is like you get if this goes through and let's say that Brookside doesn't get approval for any of that stuff and they're unable to um, be supported, then Xbox is pretty much just put a nail in the coffin for any presence whatsoever in any fighting game tournaments. Like Sony already owns Evo, so I mean they've already got a huge you know stake in that.
Yeah,
And if Xbox doesn't allow that stuff, then you can say goodbye to Xbox having a presence in fighting game tournaments, period.
yeah.
Um,
But do you know what the
it'll just be
worst
gone.
thing is? And maybe it's just me being skeptical, but it almost feels like maybe they just don't care. Like Xbox seem to have never cared that much about kind of like these gaming tournaments and esports and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, but their whole presence in gaming is Play Anywhere.
Yeah, I know, right? That's the problem.
And like by like here's the thing. Xbox is doing the right thing in one
Specific way.
aspect of this.
Yeah,
And that is that they are opening up the approval processes for more types of controllers to be authorized devices. Because before you couldn't have wireless Xbox controllers through all these
Yes.
companies. That's why Logitech and all these other companies and Razer have made these like wired controllers because that's all they were able to get approved for. But the fact that they can get now approved for these wireless things, that's great. I just want to make sure that like Xbox is allowing things like these like Brooks sticks and stuff like that
Yeah.
that allow these um, sticks that they allow these like fighting game sticks and then all these types of stuff to be compatible because that's a huge part of the market because there's still like there's a lot of fighting games that the way of playing some of the older ones now are only available through Xbox.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
there's some old fighting games that are not on PlayStation because of compatibility issues. So Xbox has a huge presence. Not to mention you have Killer Instinct, which is an Xbox exclusive fighting game, especially with the Series X version that's going to be coming out. That's a massive FGC get. So I don't know.
One thing I would say is I also think that what we have to remember about this is something that initially leaked, right? So and Microsoft have responded to it in some ways, but also there may be other things going on behind the scenes that they can't actually talk about yet. So for example, maybe they are actually in the process of working with these companies for fighting sticks and the Brooks converters and stuff like that to get them certified or whatever, right? Because if part of this process and what they're trying to do is to essentially lessen the ability for people to cheat on console in certain types of game, then it's not a bad thing necessarily. But what they have to do is make sure that they're allowing these accessories that are not cheating, right? And that are not giving an unfair advantage. Um, and I would, like, it's definitely an odd one because you would think that if they were like after the reception that this information got and this decision kind of has had, you would think that if they were working behind the scenes with these fight stick companies to make sure things are all gonna work as they need to continue working, right? You would think they would say that in their immediate response to some extent, which leads me to believe that maybe it's not even something they considered when they originally thought about this kind of new thing that they're putting in place. It which sucks because at the end of the day, the fighting game community is big and it's actually been growing for the last few years now with a renaissance of sorts for fighting games, right? Like Guilty Gear Strive and things like that are these are massive games that lots and lots of people play, and like you said, leaving leaving that community behind in a way, like, yeah, okay, I know that only a certain percentage of people who play these games actually use fight sticks, right? But the ones that do are the ones that kind of direct what everybody else thinks within that community. They are the people that are the most influential within that community, and where they go everybody else follows. So worst case scenario, if they don't support this stuff and they don't sort it out, they could see a situation where there is basically no fighting game community on Xbox. Because if these people can't use their fight sticks, why would they bother? And then when they're not on
Yes.
that machine, why is anyone else going to be bothering to be on that machine unless
Yeah,
it's the only
they'll
machine they
just
have?
move the PC pretty much, or PlayStation opens up
Precisely.
their compatibility and things and stuff like that. Like it's definitely more than just the FGC for sure. but that is a huge proponent because like fighting games already don't sell like a lot of copies. Like they sell a decent amount.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're seeing like record numbers with Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat 11 and whatnot. And like, you know, you need that community to foster all those people, especially with like um cross like crossplay being a thing now with
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff where it doesn't matter where you play, but suddenly it's going to matter where you play, whether there's crossplay or not, because there's a lot of people that play fighting games and they just don't like using the pad.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of reminds me of um, something we saw earlier this week as well on the Xbox side, which isn't relevant to us, but is relevant to a specific Xbox community, and that was they raised the price of the Xbox Series S in Brazil
Yeah,
to
by 50%.
to a level where it was like it was the same. They put it up to the same price as what the PS5 digital would be, or something like that. And
Yeah.
I believe that's a decision they've now reversed. My understanding on that decision is it is to do with the economic situation in Brazil specifically, which I understand
Yeah.
happens because it's like here in the UK, we actually, the nicest way I can put it is we kind of get the short end of the stick sometimes because we often end up paying more for video games and consoles and accessories than other countries do, even though our currency is one of the strongest, because we don't get a fair conversion rate, right? So like you, Jeff, you might how much do you pay for like a brand new game in Canada?
Um, well, I mean, it'll depend on the release for sure. But like, say Spider-Man, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I think Spider-Man it was like 89.99.
So it was 89.99. Here it was so if you get the standard edition, that was £70, which, for clarification, I believe I would have to check this, but I believe is about 95 Canadian dollars.
It's 117.82.
Well, there you go then. So worse than I thought. But do you see what I'm saying? It's so our so I do what I'm trying to say is I feel for different territories because
Ooh,
each one sort of gets screwed over a bit.
Spider-Man 2 in Australia is 124.95 Canadian.
Wow.
So,
But yeah, that kind of puts it in perspective, right? That Canadians I know also pay more than those in the States. Like,
and what's weird is like, and this is only on Xbox. I've never seen it on PlayStation.
mm,
There are some times where the Xbox price for some games, not AAA, but like AA and lower,
okay.
are the same price in the States as they are in Canada. Like they'll be 39.99 in the States and 39.99 Canadian, which means we get it way cheaper than what the States
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, one game in particular that I know that did that was Kingdoms of Amalur, the remaster. Is
Nice.
that it was $16 cheaper on Xbox than it was on PlayStation, and
Wow.
Xbox does that with a lot of their third party stuff pretty frequently.
Yeah, they do. I've and that's what I mean. It's weird, right? Because for example, I believe that Spider-Man was $70 in the US. I could be wrong about that, but I believe so for the standard edition. And
Yeah, I think it's a $20 difference. Yeah.
and again, we are paying £70 here in Britain, but really, the equivalent of $70, we should be paying about £60 per game because
Yeah.
our currency is stronger, and yet we're being made to pay the same price. So we
Mhm.
are effectively paying more for the same thing just because of where we live. And, this isn't a uniquely British thing. I'm just saying that you would assume that the country with one of the strongest currencies wouldn't necessarily have that problem, right? If it was fair for
Who knows?
everybody, it's like realistically, regardless of where you live, you should be paying the exact same price in your currency as what everybody else is paying for a game, for a device, whatever it might be. Because I think I saw that whatever they put the price up to in Brazil for the Series S, I think somebody said it was the equivalent of like nearly $700 and it's like, really? Like,
I mean, at that price, you might as well just get a Series X.
precisely. And I saw one retailer or a guy that works in a retailer say that they had people they actually had people for months now coming from South American countries to go and buy Xboxes and stuff like that and take them back, and they'd buy more than one because they'd buy them for their friends as well. So they'd literally travel to America just to buy an Xbox because of and it's just like I'm
Yeah, that
I'm
reminds me of yeah, it reminds me of like even like the developers of Metro 2033 is like when they needed computers and computer parts and stuff, it was cheaper for them to get a ticket, fly to the United States, buy the computers, and then head back.
it's crazy.
Like
That's
it's
crazy.
nuts.
And I
Like
mean, that is part of a wider problem in the world, because I'm not saying that this is unique to this industry, but I think that this price increase thing in Brazil has highlighted it more recently, and people have started talking about it. And personally,
yeah,
I just think that pricing should be fair in the sense of I shouldn't have to pay more. I shouldn't have to pay more because of where I live, and people in Brazil shouldn't have to pay more because of where they live.
especially digital.
Yeah,
Especially digital. Physical, I can understand because like they have to ship those games to Australia or whatever the
yeah,
case is. Like
absolutely.
goods and services are definitely more expensive. But like digital,
It should
like
be.
that's the
It
thing
should
where
be
it's like
absolute. It should just be whatever the exchange rate is. That is what you pay. Like they should. So, for example, it should be. You know, I'm not saying this is the case necessarily,
well,
but
it's like comic books.
yeah,
Comic books have a price on the actual cover. So
yeah,
then you just do the currency conversion. It's not like they're putting like, oh, you see 4.99 and you're paying 6.99.
yeah,
Like you can't put a higher price over a lower price. It's the same as like Arizona iced tea. Like Arizona
yeah.
iced teas used to be 90 say 79 cents or whatever the case was, and it was printed on the can. And then they shorted the market, brought them back out with a higher price, and they've done it again to the point where now the cans don't have the price on it, so that the markup can just
Wow,
happen naturally.
wow. But it's
So
just
it's
crazy
that
because
thing.
in my head it's like, okay, let's say you're Microsoft, right? In my head it's like, what is the problem with saying our prices are set by whatever we want the price in the US to be, and then every other region will just pay their regional equivalent at whatever the time is. And maybe you round it up slightly to make it a set figure rather than changing all the time. But let's say that the conversion rate right now is £60 to 70 US dollars, or around £60. Let's say it's 58 something. I don't mind paying £60 because paying £2 above what I should is okay. Paying 10, 15, or in some cases £20 more than I should, that's not really fair for anybody. And I just I'm glad that we luckily don't pay as much for
I
consoles,
think
in the sense of our consoles are fairly priced. So, for example, the Series S here is £250, and the Series X is £450, which is about exactly what it should be based on the other prices. But yeah, games is where we get the short end of the stick here.
I mean, I'm sure there's like economic laws and all sorts of stuff in terms of like the laws that go into how games can be sold in particular countries, which is why like, things like VPNs have become massive for like PC and stuff like that, where they're just, they're downloading or they're changing their location essentially so that the games are essentially cheaper for them. Um, but then also there's different ways of collecting currency as well too, whether it's buying like particular like disposable credit cards or whatever, so that you can purchase those things. Because I know a lot of people, it's like it's tough to get like funds of a different country
Yeah,
to buy that stuff.
absolutely.
Like I changed like because like I changed my um location to purchase a game that was only available in Japan on Steam.
Yeah.
So
But I do like that is one thing I will say, to be fair, to give Xbox some credit. I like the fact that because they're fully region free with their stuff, I can travel to Canada and buy a game and use it on my system, and I don't even have to do that. I could change my region to Canada if I wanted to and buy the game, and I would still own the game on my account even if I change my region back later. It's it's
there's
it,
probably a lot of people that do that to get games cheaper.
yeah, and it's it is a good system, and I like I am a big fan of region free, and I wish that every single console and storefront did completely region free.
PlayStation.
Talking
Yeah.
of PlayStation, Jeff,
Yeah.
some of their studios have had some very bad news recently. So what's been happening over at PlayStation?
Yeah, I mean, so PlayStation's head of internal game production, Connie Booth, has departed from Sony. She's been there for more than 30 years. Um, So yeah, this comes from, I believe, Eurogamer. Sorry, I got it from. Booth's departure has been discussed earlier this week by outspoken former game director David Jaffe, another PlayStation alumni. In a further video published yesterday, Jaffe alleged that Booth had been fired amidst longer-term internal tensions around PlayStation Studios moving to develop more live service games. In a statement issued to Axios, Sony confirmed Booth's departure but did not give further explanation. Booth helped drive the success of PlayStation Studios and experiencing to is the helped drive the success PlayStation Studios is experiencing today, and her passion is fostering an environment where a team's creative vision could fully flourish. Has left a positive impact on many game developers. We're thankful for Connie's numerous contributions to the company and wish her the best in the future endeavors. Whenever a company says they will wish you the best in future endeavors, it means you have been terminated.
Yeah, I
It
agree.
doesn't mean that you have gone. um, I've worked in retail, and whenever anyone says future endeavors, I'm like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it is literally like they've been fired. Booth's tenure at PlayStation lasted almost 3 decades. After joining in 1995 as a producer working with Naughty Dog to launch Crash Bandicoot, which is now owned by Xbox.
hmm
Booth's time at Sony stretches back even longer, though, having worked at Sony Corporation of America since 1989. As director and then vice president of Sony Production, Booth worked on the roll call of famous PlayStation franchises such as Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, Infamous, Resistance, Uncharted, Last of Us, and Marvel's Spider-Man. Booth was inducted into the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame in 2020 when she was described as integral into the part of many PlayStation most loved games. The fact that she's been let go is
Worrying.
my guess. It could, yeah, it could be that she was very outspoken about the live service stuff. Um, and I mean, PlayStation has attempted to jump into live service stuff, and it has
hmm
done so right on the it's they've done so on the deep end, but they can't swim. They've been like,
Rather than rather
the
than taking it steady and learning how to swim, they've kind
yeah,
of just
like even
jumped
the
in.
pretty much like Last of Us, their live service multiplayer game is like on indefinite hold right now.
Which
And
basically
then
means cancelled for everyone. Like, as a developer,
kind of
when that happens, that essentially means unless something massive changes in the future, that game is never coming out. Like,
Yeah, it's hard to say, and I mean, like even then, like the live service stuff just doesn't stop. Moving on here, we've got Bungie's recent layoffs amounted to 100 staff, or roughly 8% of the developer's workforce, according to a new report. This is through VGC, so please give them a check out there. It was confirmed on Monday that Bungie was the latest Sony Interactive studio to be hit with layoffs, so the scope of the job cuts wasn't yet clear. A new report by Bloomberg through Jason Schreier has led more light on the situation, saying staff were warned in a meeting earlier this month that revenue was running at around 45% below what was projected, which Chief Executive Officer Pete Parsons, or player retention for Destiny 2. I jumped off Destiny 2 because personally the raids made that game like not enjoyable for me anymore. I
yeah.
found them far too difficult for the investment. You would get people playing for 4 to 6 hours, get no progress, and then your team would break apart, and then you wouldn't get to experience those portions of the game. There was no matchmaking for it. There were no easier modes with maybe less rewards. Like I just want to go through the content. I don't care if I'm getting the rewards, and that's why I bounced off Destiny. And then they were removing content, and then they were changing everything. And to me, I I will never play Destiny again. It
Interesting.
just will be a game that I will not play, despite me absolutely loving Destiny. Like Destiny 1, I probably put like 1,000 hours into that game. Destiny 2, probably at least 500 to 800. Like I played a lot of Destiny, and it just the raids to me drove me away from that game
That's
because
fair.
I
That's
just
fair.
finding a team
mm.
commitment to push through that stuff is just a nightmare.
I want to talk.
Um,
I want to talk a minute about these Bungie layoffs specifically, because 100 people, 8% of the workforce. That's a lot of people. Okay, and I get it. Their revenues are significantly, what is it, 45% lower than expected.
yeah,
I get it, and we know from Destiny 2's numbers that they are struggling for player retention compared to where the game has been previously in terms of player numbers. Um, but when they lay off people like Salvatore, I forget his first name, but the co-composer of like Halo and Destiny, and he's been there for years. You know,
yeah, Michael Salvatore.
yeah, Michael Salvatore, and it's like he's created some of the most iconic music, or helped to create some of the most iconic music in the industry, and then you just lay him off like it's nothing, and layoffs are bad. Whoever that, like, I want to make clear, layoffs suck for anyone that gets laid off. Yes, they are a part of business and they will always happen, and I can see that side of it. But for whoever gets laid off, it always sucks. However, what I would say is I feel like any smart business would have a situation where certain people should be, really, like, are we really gonna lay off one of, a prolific person like that? It would kind of be like, I don't know. it it would kind of be like Sony if they laid off Neil Druckmann. Do you know what I mean? If in the like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, there are certain people that I think should almost be protected from layoffs, because
I think all their staff should be protected. It just comes down to bad management, really.
yeah.
Like most of these companies don't have these like rainy day funds
Mhm.
essentially put in place. But I mean,
Yeah.
like every single person should be
And
should
also and
should be
also let's
protected. This is why unions have
yeah.
become
Uh,
such a big focus.
and also let's put another thing out there as well. This is the thing, right? This is where layoffs really suck. Is none of these companies making layoffs actually need to make them, and that's the problem. Because, yeah, okay, Bungie specific revenue is lower than expected. We know that PlayStation has been on a staff cutting spree. They've cut staff from Naughty Dog, from Santa Monica, from Media Molecule, who we'll talk about in a minute. But it's just like it's they're making billions in profit a year, and they're cutting staff to save.
Yeah, that's like Activision when Bobby Kotick was like, "This is a record year. Goodbye to 300 people."
Yeah, like what the hell? I can. No one would complain about layoffs if they had to happen to keep you in business. Nobody is ever going to complain about that kind of situation. But when you're making so much profit and you're basically cutting people just to save a bit of money and make some more money, that's just like, what kind of person are you? Like, be a human being.
Yeah. Oh, just wait. The Bungie thing, like here, it gets worse.
Okay.
Parsons is also said to have told staff and that salary and hiring freezes would be taking place, but 2 weeks later, on Monday, around 100 of the staff were told that they were being laid off. Forbes writer Paul Tassi tweeted out more information that he'd received from a source, including claims that many employees' benefits lasted until the end of the month, meaning that because staff were laid off on October 30th, their benefits only lasted a single day. This was corroborated by Bloomberg's report, which also noted that healthcare was a separate benefit and will still be available for the next 3 or so months to be let go. One potentially contentious issue is that of employee shares, the majority of which were owned by Bungie employees before Sony's acquisition. Last year, Sony revealed that about 1.2 billion of its 3.6 billion acquisition of Bungie was to be spent on employee retention, which we used to reward existing employees if they didn't leave and stayed with Bungie for a certain number of years. Since one of the main reasons for Sony's acquisition was to make use of Bungie's knowledge base, it planned to incentivize the shareholders and other creative talent to continue working at Bungie after the acquisition closes. Eligible employees had unvested shares, which are shares that are put aside for them and cannot be accessed until they meet a certain requirement, in this case, staying with Bungie for a certain number of years. According to Tassi's source, those shares revert to Bungie if you leave, even if you are fired, which is what's happening now to many of those affected. So,
That's ridiculous. I'm sorry, but that is one of the worst things I've ever heard.
and then Parsons ended up doing a tweet later on. It's not part of this article, saying that with Destiny 2 and all that kind of stuff and everything Bungie wise, that we've kept the right people to put in those
The
positions.
right people. Like, everybody there is the right person. They were part of making the game. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for. This just makes me angry. Like, so essentially, you've cut these people on a very specific date to minimize the benefits you have to continue to give them. You've also cut them on a specific time to avoid having to pay out their shares, which are rightfully theirs, really. But they've just been screwed over by an ownership change. And
Yeah,
not only that,
through
but I saw an article somewhere, and I would have to find it, which would be quite hard right now. Maybe you can look it up, Jeff. But at the point of at the time of the acquisition, Sony basically guaranteed that there would be no layoffs from Bungie for a certain amount of time, and yet
yeah,
they
yeah,
haven't
it was
kept that
part of
word.
a yeah, it was part of a big JPEG. Well, the thing too is like Bungie's also owned by Sony. They're not owned by Sony PlayStation, like they're owned by Sony proper
Yeah.
because of just how that works. But yeah, so it says Bungie CEO Pete Parsons told remaining employees that the company had kept the right people to work on Destiny 2. This was through IGN.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like there was something about how there was going to be like no layoffs for Bungie or whatever, and like
And also
like
the other thing is, like, yeah, they're owned by Sony, but this has been made clear that these cuts are part of a wider PlayStation cost saving movement.
Well, PlayStation commented, I thought it was commented that PlayStation had nothing to do with the Bungie layoffs,
Oh, because
that it was
I
all Bungie.
saw. I think it might have been Jason Schreier, possibly somebody else, who basically said that these cuts were part of a
Bungie's
wider.
This was on Game Rant. It says Bungie's recent decision to lay off staff has shocked its fan base and has been a blow to its public image and the confidence of the Destiny 2 community. The choice to terminate its staff was made by Bungie management and not by its parent company Sony, according to an anonymous internal source, which has surprised many fans.
Interesting. Okay, because I did
So
see.
again, Jason Schreier may have found something a bit
So
more intense,
and
but
don't
this was
get.
as of 15 hours ago.
So don't get me wrong. I don't fully like this source here. It's a local source here in the UK called the Metro. Um, but basically they reported as of 3 hours ago that um the headline is PlayStation undergoing money saving initiative which includes Bungie job losses. And then it talks about how they first laid off Naughty Dog staff and now Bungie, and according to their sources there will be further layoffs, and there is a concern over Fire Sprite Studio specifically, um,
Yeah,
which some
Metro
sources
is
have said
is
might be shut down completely. Um,
yeah, Metro's is as reliable as getting to work with a car with no wheels.
it is, it
Like,
is. However, what I would say is in their article, they do source, and they a lot of their article basically says according to Bloomberg. So it probably was Schreier that I saw the information from originally.
yeah,
Um, but yes,
like
it
even
does.
even like Alana Pierce, like she tweeted out, she was like, I can't understand anybody wanting to get into this industry now.
Yeah,
And I absolutely agree. Like, just
it's
because like you
volatile.
eventually land, yeah, like you land your dream job at working at wherever, and then all of a sudden, like 8 months later, you're let go. Like,
Yeah.
there's people that probably moved their entire families
Mm-hmm.
to go work at Bungie
Yeah.
and then have been
One
let go.
one thing I will say is I actually think that part of part of the industry's move to more remote work and stuff wasn't like, yes, obviously it came from COVID and the global pandemic and all that kind of thing, but I think that the reason it's continued is actually because every game that's made always ends up with certain staff being laid off, right? Like, normally you will have your core staff on a game that work for whoever the developer is, and then you'll have sort of contractors where they come in specifically to work on that game, but they are not guaranteed a job in the long term, right? We saw this
It's like
on.
seasonal folk at retail.
Mhm.
It's like you're there essentially to like help with like the setup of that sale for the season, and then then you are let go once that season ends.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff just sucks, man, because like I said, this industry every single year makes more money. Like every year it makes more money across the entire industry. We're talking about billions and billions and billions in profit.
Yeah.
There's no need really, and unless you're a small developer, there
Yeah.
really should never be any need to lay anybody off, you know?
Yeah, it was
And
like even like
go on.
Jeff Keighley had like tweeted out saying like this is like one of the best years ever and like one of like some of the most incredible releases. And I was so tempted to go like by releases, do you mean the people that have been released from their employment?
That would have been an amazing reply because that's the hardest thing. I actually saw a similar tweet from Paris Lily, who obviously works with Kind of Funny sometimes and other things like that. But he made the point that it's like this year is really conflicting because in one way it's one of the best years ever in gaming history, and then in another way it's the worst year ever because the amount of layoffs we're seeing is ridiculous, right? Like it's literally everywhere,
Well,
and
it's one of the best year for players. It's one of the worst year for devs.
yeah, that's the way to put it. It's and
Well, even
that's
like Atari just bought Digital Eclipse and some other
mhm,
company,
yeah.
and like Atari has not been good with their money in the last little while. Like, what the like? Why would you accept that? Like, it's so dumb.
Yeah, I don't know. It is a strange choice for sure. Um, and obviously
So
the sad part is for PlayStation and their studios generally, because let's be real, we'll still associate Bungie with PlayStation now, whether they made that decision or not, right? But for PlayStation studios, Bungie isn't where the cuts have stopped because, of course, we have Media Molecule. So what's going on with them, Jeff?
yeah, so Sports Illustrated said this has announced that the studio has held an internal meeting and has told staff that it plans to lay off about 20 of its 135 employees. This news comes a month after Media Molecule ended support for Dreams, which was released in early access in April 2019 before officially launching in February of 2020. Why that game didn't come to PC, I have no idea. That would have completely turned it around. But
Do you know what the
Media
funniest
Molecule
thing is?
has.
Do you know what the funniest thing is about that game? Um, it
Hmm.
actually was a very good tool set, and I
Yeah,
think they didn't. They clearly made some mistakes with it because I think that they didn't make it clear enough to people what it was. But I also
they didn't know how to
think,
market it.
yeah, they didn't know how to market it. And one of their biggest mistakes was until later in the life of the game, people who were making stuff on it had no way to monetize what they were making, and they had no way to actually make money from it. And the weirdest part of that is like you could have used Dreams to literally create the next generation of game developers because it was a tool set that was deep enough to make an entire game in, and it was easy enough to use that anybody of any age could learn it, right? Because it had different layers to it. So it's a shame because, like you said, if it would have come to PC, um, I feel like it would have actually been much more successful, and especially if they had done a situation where it was like you can make the stuff on PC and then people can play it on their consoles. I do think they made some mistakes, and it's a shame really because now the people who worked there are suffering for it.
Yeah. Media Molecule has confirmed the layoffs. So, in an article posted on the game's official website earlier this year, the studio explained that it had made the difficult decision to discontinue live support for Dreams after September 1st of 2023 to shift their focus onto an exciting new project. Players are still able to play, create, and share content of the game, but it will be receiving no further updates. Players can also now only have 5 gig storage limit for any new creations. The Media Molecule layoffs are the latest in a long string of mass layoffs taking place across the industry this year. Earlier this month, it was reported that Telltale laid off a number of employees and that Team 17 is planning a significant job losses as part of a company restructure. Last month, it was announced that Epic Games would be laying off about 16% of its staff, consisting of around 830 employees. So pretty much every single publisher out there, almost every single dev is just like there are hundreds, like there's probably at least like 2,000 people this year
Yeah.
that have lost their jobs across the industry, and that's
Hmm.
probably a low estimate.
Yeah, it probably
But
is.
it is
Because
it's
especially
horrible.
for some of these bigger companies, like how many did you just say from Epic? Like
It's 830.
just from one. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like that's a lot of people. And don't get me wrong. One thing I will say about this industry, in a positive way, is that it's so dynamic. Um, that these people will be able to find work and they will be able to find jobs. that doesn't make the fact that they've lost their jobs for no real reason any easier, right? And that's the problem here, is like, in most of these cases, these companies and these people are like, they're losing their jobs for no reason, right? I could understand it if we were talking about, I don't know, some smaller studio with 40 staff that make a double A game, and maybe their game hasn't done very well when it came out, didn't sell well enough, like that Ascendant Studio. You know what I mean? The guys who made that game recently, and it's like they laid off half of their staff. Nobody. The thing about that one was it made sense because clearly the game didn't make money. So in order to stay in business, they kind of had no choice. Um, but in these other cases, like Epic, how much money do Epic make? Like, they make so much money.
Just released like a couple new skins on Fortnite. It would have paid for everything.
And also, they're the publisher of Alan Wake 2, which is about to make money. It's just, I don't get it. I really don't get it. Like,
Yeah, it's like Boomerang X, like their dev, like Dang, they shut down due to lack of funding.
Jeez.
And I mean, like Boomerang X was a pretty interesting game, but the only person I ever saw talk about it was Andy Cortez. I think he was the only person I ever saw play it.
I think that's the problem, isn't it? With and we've spoken about this before, but games nowadays, because there are so many, and because there are so many established IPs and franchises, it's actually really hard for those smaller things and for those newer things, even when they're not small, to break through. Like something like Atlas Fallen, which we both played. Decent game, not bad at all. Good fun, good co-op game as well. But other than me and you, I've never heard anyone say a word about it. Do you know what I mean? It's strange, and it's a little bit disheartening because the industry never used to be that way. Like, it just didn't. Like, and we went through a renaissance period for a while for smaller games where they were actually breaking through really easily. Things like Death's Door and Celeste and these amazing games, Untitled Goose Game. Do you know what I mean? Like, there were these amazing games that for a few years there seemingly were starting to find it easier to break through, and that seems to have disappeared again now. And I don't know whether it's just because we're in a period of time where there's even more oversaturation than usual, because obviously a lot of these games are games that got delayed during the pandemic and are only just making their way out now, right? Like, I guarantee you that without a global pandemic in 2020 and 21, most of the games that are coming out this year probably would have been out last year, or there certainly would have been a more even split between the 2 years. So I think,
because there's a lot of games that even in the last like 2 months that are just going to get like destroyed by the stuff that's been coming out this year. Like, I really want to try that Hellboy game.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wonder how good that is even done with all the stuff that's coming out this year. Like, it's
and do you know what the funniest thing about it is? Because the stuff this year is so high quality as well, which we've spoken about before, it's created this situation where even games that are considered very good this year are not good enough. And I'll give you an example. Assassin's Creed Mirage, has an average score on OpenCritic of the high 70s. And when you look at it, it has over an 80% recommendation from all critics. And yet, people will look at that game and go, it's not good enough. But actually, a high 70s is a really good score. The problem is we're in a year where we've had more 90 plus games than ever. Normally you get 2 or 3 90 plus
Yeah.
games in a year.
I mean, look at like two very similar games in regards to what they're offering, and you get like Sonic Superstars and Mario Wonder. And Mario Wonder sold like, what is it, 200,000 copies or something in its first like week, whatever, and then Sonic sold like 4K,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
or something like that. Like, I mean, also there's no reason Sonic Superstars should have been full price.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
Uh,
there's no reason.
it's
But
very strange because, and we'll be looking back more on this year in the next weeks to come, but it's been a weird one. Like, there are games that came out this year that I completely forgot came out this year. For example, Hogwarts Legacy. Like, every time somebody reminds me that that game came out this year, it
yeah,
blows my mind because it was so long ago, and it feels like we've almost had 2 years of games in one year, and
yeah. There's like you start the year and you're like, oh my god, this is going to be a game of the year contender, like Hi-Fi Rush,
yeah,
and no one's talking about it anymore.
no, no.
Like
And
recency bias is always
oh yeah,
what it
there's
is.
always a recency bias. I can guarantee you now that that will be in my list. So there's a little preview for you of our game of the year lists. But yeah, it just makes me sad because it the smaller things this year have really struggled to break through. Even in a double A sense, right? Even the double A games this year, which tend to sort of break through more easily. Something like Plague Tale Requiem, which was my game of the year last year, that's a double A game, and it really hit quite well, and lots of people played it. If that came out this year, it would have been buried. Like, it would have been absolutely buried under a mountain of things, and it's such a shame. But hopefully, not that look, I'm not complaining because this year has been amazing, and I think Jeff would agree with that. But hopefully, we can have a more normal gaming year next year and actually allow players more time to breathe between games. Like, I don't even own
That'll
Mario
never happen.
Wonder because Mario Wonder came out on the same day as Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 2 is a game that I've only played 3 to 4 hours of so far because I've had to play other things. And so it's just like it's just constant, and it always has been, and it's been that way for quite a few years now. But I think that build up of stuff created a problem almost, and it created almost like an unbalanced industry this year. And I am a little bit concerned for some of these smaller developers or developers making their first thing, like Ascendant Studio. They actually made a really good game. Like, Immortals of Avium was a fun game that did some unique things, and could have been a really interesting franchise going forward. And now it probably never will be, right? And it's just, that's such a shame because, again, and hindsight is like a wonderful thing to look at and think about, but it's like I look at that game and I think, do you know what? If this game came out last year instead, it probably would have done really, really well because last year was so much slower in terms of games that I guess what it proves is that in the industry, timing is everything, right? The problem is that a bad timing decision can completely kill a game, which leads to layoffs and all these other issues we're talking about with the industry. Think of like Titanfall 2. Like, EA literally sacrificed their own game, and they won't admit it, but it's because they didn't believe in it enough. And then it ended up getting this cult following and being potentially one of the best FPS games, in the last God knows how many years. but they didn't believe in it, so they sent it out to die. You know, I don't get it. Like, let's get better with timing, people, please. You know, I don't want these days where Mario Wonder and Spider-Man 2 come out on the same day. I get that for most people that isn't an issue because they'll only want to play one of those games, or they might only have one of those machines. But, you know, I want to play both of those games. So even if you could space them out by a week next time, that would be wonderful, you know.
Yeah,
uh,
there's just a lot, especially games that are like even similar to each other,
Absolutely,
um, like
absolutely.
like Sonic and Mario.
Well, think about it, right? Like, we're both playing a bit of Alan Wake 2 at the minute, obviously, that we mentioned earlier, which we'll speak more about on the next episode. But that is essentially a survival horror game. How many survival horror games have there been this year? Do you know what I mean? Is and
There's been a
yet
few.
and yet that's a franchise that a few years ago, like, that's a genre that we thought was dead. And you know, it certainly isn't. So this has been a wonderful year. I have no complaints about it whatsoever in that sense, in the sense of quality and really fun gaming experiences. This has been, like, I don't think anybody could even argue at this point that this has been the best year in gaming for overall quality of games. Like, I don't even think there's an argument to be had another year, you know. Like like I was saying the other day, I think Alan Wake 2's dropped to an 89 now because Eurogamer gave it 3 out of 5 or something. But it's like, they were a 90, and they were actually well above a 90. So we, for a while there, we were in a situation where we had 3 90 plus rated games release in a week. Like, in 1 week, we had 3 90 plus games. That's normally what we get in like a year. And I understand that not everybody pays attention to aggregation scores and stuff like that. But one thing I would remind people is these scores matter to the people who make the games, because it's almost like a validation of their work, right? And it's the same way that reviews, positive or negative, matter to these people. And that's why when you see people absolutely trashing that King Kong game, which isn't a very good game at all, it's like, you can say that it's not a good game and make it clear without basically insulting the fact that people have spent time making this game. Like, at the end of the day,
Well,
I'm sure that those people did the best of their ability with the resources they had and the time that they had to make that
well,
game.
Game Mill told them that they had a year to make it, and um, like my review for uh, DreamWorks All Star Racing comes out on Friday, and that team, Bamtang Games, they also made Nickelodeon Slime Speedway, Nick Kart Racing 3, and that came out a year ago. So they also had a year to work on the DreamWorks All Star Racing, and like my review is going to state that as well too. Like they had a year, so like Game Mill is living up to their name essentially by like being
Pushing
this
these games
student,
out the
this
door, right?
publisher
Yeah.
that are just like, yeah, just manufacturing games. Like they're like, I call them almost like quick to cash um, games. Is essentially is like they they are they are the same type of license house that are just they they don't take advantage of their license properly, and they don't give the teams the time they need to make it, because I'm pretty sure that Skull Island Rise of Kong could be a decent game, but you
Given a
look at
proper
it and like
development
it
cycle.
is
Yeah.
unbelievably bad. And
Yeah.
even like that All-Star Racing, like it's very, very basic.
Yeah. And
Like
that's,
it's
and that,
it's a
I
huge
do,
step back from the last racing game.
I want to be clear as well. I'm not sat here saying that people shouldn't say a game is bad when it's bad. And I think you know that, Jeff. I think you know that that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is reviewers specifically as well. And I'm not going to name the person. I'm not going to even name the website. But you shouldn't essentially be insulting people for doing their jobs and doing the best that they can do with the time and resources they have. Like, it's something I try and put across to people all the time, but I think that a lot of people either ignore it or just don't really understand it. The people actually making the game, a lot of the time, are not. They're kind of working in a situation where things are outside of their control. So, Cyberpunk is a really good example of this. The development team knew that the game wasn't ready. They told the people higher up in that company the game wasn't ready, and they told them months ahead of time that it wasn't going to be ready. And yet, the bean counters and the business people made the decision of, let's push the game out anyway, and we all know how that went, right? I get that you can have the argument of like, yeah, okay, when you're on a schedule and when you're an employee of a company and you have deadlines to meet, to some extent it is your fault if you don't meet those deadlines, right? But there are also such a thing as unfair deadlines and not enough resources. And asking a team to make a King Kong game in a year is pretty impossible. Like, I'm just going to put it the way it is. That the best development team that you could think of in the world could not make a King Kong game and it be a good game in a year. They couldn't do it. Like, there might be one developer that could do it, and that would be Rockstar, and that's only because they have so many staff at their disposal that 800 people working on a game for a year could probably actually come up with something really, really good. Most studios...
Yeah, but even then, Rockstar's output hasn't been like fast. I
Yeah.
would say like if you were gonna get a King Kong game made in a year, I think the only studio that could probably really do it would be Insomniac, considering how many releases that they put out
Yeah, I don't
in the
know how
past
they
like
do what they
5
do, to be
years.
fair.
Because I mean, they're also working on Wolverine.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I just wanted a little rant there because I do I feel passionate for developers, and I think that people in review terms, and I'm speaking to gamers generally, but also the reviewers as well, need to remember that what these reviews say and what these scores are matter to the people making the game, even if they don't matter to you personally. So, for example, on a more positive one recently, right? Speaking of Insomniac, Spider-Man 2 is their first 90 plus average game ever in the history of that company. Can you imagine what a feeling that is for the developers that have worked on that game, and for some of them that have been at that company for years and years and years and years? Like, that, it's a weird industry because some people will say, oh, awards don't matter and stuff like that. It's like some people, a lot of gamers I hear sort of go, oh, the game awards don't really matter. Like, who actually cares about the awards kind of thing. But the awards aren't for you. They're for the people making the game. And review scores, in a way, are awards. And no dev is, no dev is opposed to getting a bad review. Like, they want to read the bad reviews as well because they want to learn from whatever a certain person didn't like, right? So but what I'm saying is, let's say that you release a game and it gets a 46 average score, you're going to be a bit disheartened. Even if you've spent only a year making a game, you're going to be a bit disheartened because you're going to feel like, oh, I didn't do well enough, even though, in a weird way, some of those circumstances might have been outside of your control. And of course, though, I'm not saying that those are things that should impact review scores, because at the end of the day, the review is of the game, it's not of the circumstances surrounding the game.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a job of a review when writing about a game, and this is something both me and you do, Jeff. But, you know, make people aware, especially if it's a smaller game like we often review on Analog Stick Gaming. Give people a little bit of context for the development of the game, and give people the context of, like, yeah, okay, this is the score this game got, but this might be part of the reason why this game is in the situation that it's in. Do you know what I mean? And credit to you, Jeff, because I think that's something you do very, very well, where there are games that you've reviewed from studios that I've never even heard of, right? And I'm someone who works in the industry, and I've not heard of some of these studios. So actually, you're doing a good job of informing me with your reviews and putting context on what the score is, of, like, you know, it's just giving a bit of context. It's kind of like, I look at something like Plague Tale Requiem. Nobody is going to look at that game and be like, oh yeah, it's got to be as good as Last of Us, or it's not very good. You know, like, at the end of the day, they have a different set of resources, and like, I don't know, I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like in this, in gaming generally, people seem to have forgotten nowadays that different teams have different resources, and we shouldn't have the same expectations for every single game that is made, because that's not how gaming works.
Yeah, there was hold on, I'm trying to find the developer here. There was a game that came out on PlayStation 5 called Quantum Error.
Oh, is this the one that, yeah,
Um,
reviewed quite low, right?
and Team Kill went out on their Twitter and they're saying like they've been kind of lashing out on Twitter here. I'm just bringing up the thing. It says we are proud of our game and actually take all the criticism as a compliment. To be judged against AAA budget games when we are clearly indie with a small budget, which creates limitations. For everyone trashing us on social media or rejoicing in trashing us, it won't stop us from changing for stop us or change what we're doing. We can't wait for the games for gamers to play QE. We are so excited that our players are going to finally get to play our game, and nothing will stop our excitement. We will continue to get better and with a bigger budget to do even more in the future. Negative, negative opinions do absolutely nothing to change our resolve and the games we're working on. Some people are not going to like our game, and that's fine because that's why there are so many other games that you can choose. Constructive criticism we accept. To the gamers, we are not modern gaming. We are more old school, and QE is meant to be explored and figured out at your own after the tutorials. Now, they ended up going out later and saying that there were a lot of people that were um, criticizing the game, like YouTubers and other reviewers, saying like, "Oh, the game is bad," and all yada yada
And
yada.
they
And
didn't
they've
even give them
come out and
codes, right?
said, and they didn't even give them codes. So they're like, "Yeah, these people here who have like reviewed our game, they haven't even received codes."
Yeah.
I've reached out to them through their PR channels to see if I can get a code for it,
Do you know what
because
I
the
would?
game
Do you know
looks
what I would
quite good.
say? Their response to the reviews and their kind of the way that they're taking it in their stride makes me want to play the game now, just to see, just to
Well,
see.
they originally had some so this was a team that had said that, and I'll just read this last paragraph, which will put it all into context. Quantum Error is releasing on PS5 on November 3rd, and the team has said that it's also working on a PC version. An Xbox Series X version is said to be held back by a slower SSD inside Microsoft's console. Now, I mean, that it doesn't look like a type of game that is going to be using the SSD in such a way where you can't get an Xbox version out. That could just be the inexperience of the tech side of the team. I don't know. I have no idea because again, the game looks really good, but I mean, like, I don't see, um, I don't see why you wouldn't make it for the Xbox if you're also making it for the PC, considering that not all PC SSD drives are as fast even as the Xbox One.
Yeah.
So does that mean that you're creating that game for an even more exclusive build? I have no idea. It could just be that they just don't have the resources to make an Xbox version or to deal with the optimization. I
That's
have no
true.
idea.
That's
But
true.
this was a team that kind of unintentionally kind of created a lot of console war ire. So
Yeah, it's so weird as well because it's like, yeah, okay, maybe it's not the best game in the world, and right now it's a PlayStation exclusive, and, you know, PlayStation have so many hits that for some people it seems to be nice when they have an exclusive that maybe doesn't deliver, but it's like, I'm past that point where I even care about that stuff because I just want to have good in-depth conversations. I don't mind comparing consoles. It's something that we're going to do probably in the next couple of weeks. Um, as we sort of, we're approaching the 3-year anniversary of the launch of this generation, so we'll probably do a bit more discussion about that. But I have no problem comparing consoles, that's fine. Console wars, though, are just stupid at this point because let's be real. A bad game is a bad game regardless of what device it's on, and a good game is a good game regardless of what device it's on. I understand that when it's a good game, there might be some fear of like, oh, I'm missing out, and for some people that might make them want to kind of trash on something so that they feel like they're missing out less. But to me, that's a young like teenager or young child on the playground kind of attitude where I can understand a kid wanting to say, "Oh, your thing's not as good as mine because it's the only thing they have," right? But when we're talking about full-grown adults, like just enjoy your video games, and when there's a bad video game, let's just talk about it. And I have to praise the team once again, who made this game because the way that they've dealt with not very good reviews for their game, and the way that they've kind of taken it in their stride and said, look, to even be compared to these other games, like that's a good point they made about to even be compared to these other games when we are an indie game with much smaller resources. That in itself is a compliment because it means you're thinking about the game in the same context. And that says something because if you're thinking about the game in the same context of a much higher budget game, that means they're doing something right to even bring that comparison into your mind in the first place. In a weird way, right? It's so yeah, credit to them for that, but I'm what I would say is I'm actually glad that this game isn't on Xbox right now because if it was, I probably would be playing it for sure. And there are too many games, as we mentioned earlier. And you, Jeff, have been playing a lot of games recently. So why don't we start to go through what we've been playing before we wrap up this episode? So our last segment
sure.
is what we've been playing.
So I'll keep some for Sunday when we record. I'll keep DreamWorks just because like that game will have just released.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, like I've beat Spider-Man 2, uh,
Okay.
and the review will be going out today for it. It's really good. It still has some of that open world busy work that I'm not terribly fond of. I don't care much for the mini games and things like that or that kind of stuff. I skip all those games.
I do.
It's not why I
I
play
have a
the
question,
Spider-Man
Jeff,
games.
because you've obviously played the whole game. I've only played a few hours.
Yeah.
How many technical issues did you have with the game? Because I know that there have been some for people.
Yeah, I had a lot of crashes. I also had like people getting stuck in walls and then like their legs like bouncing and glitching and all that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, like I had some technical issues, and again, I don't know what led to them.
Hmm.
You know, I have no idea like the reasons for it. But yeah, I think I had like six crashes, I think.
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot of crashes. Um, I I don't know if I've ever had a game crash on PlayStation 5 to their credit. Like I said, I've only played 4 hours of Spider-Man 2 so far, but it's not crashed for me. I what I would say about the game, and I do want to go back to you in a second, is so far I'm in the headspace where it's like I'm enjoying it and I like it. I'm just not sure I love it in the way that I really did love the first game and I really did love Miles Morales, and I don't know why that is. The only
I
thing
think
I
you'll get
can
there for sure.
put my finger on at the moment as to potentially why is there are some changes to the combat in the sense of the core combat is the same and you're pressing the same buttons for basic attacks and stuff, but you're now using you're essentially activating different abilities now, aren't you?
Yeah, I like that way better. Like, w I like it way better, especially like the more streamlined gadgets. It's like the web bomb, the
Mm-hmm.
impact webbing, all that stuff's gone
Yeah,
because there's just four gadgets. But the nice thing about it is like you activate those gadgets in real time during combat. You're not bringing up a radio wheel and then
yeah,
selecting something.
yeah.
Um,
It's definitely
no, like
what I will say to the credit
yeah,
of the game, as I've started to get used to it a little bit more. Um, it is definitely smoother and it helps the flow of gameplay better. But I also feel like maybe it's just me, but I feel like four different attacks across two characters with the gadget buttons to remember as well is quite a lot to remember. And it's I
yeah, and it takes a little while to get into it, and even like when you eventually get the symbiote suit for Peter, you'll be doing something and he's like and he'll do an attack and then it'll swap it to a certain spot because it needs those attacks to be active.
okay.
Um,
Interesting.
but
So
yeah, it takes a little
what are
bit.
your overall thoughts on Spider-Man 2? I know you've got your review obviously, which people will be
Yeah,
able to go and read by the time they've seen this episode, but
yeah.
yeah.
It's really good. Like I still think like I think the people in New York look really bad. Especially for this being a PS5 game. I think everything in that game looks gorgeous except for the pedestrians that are, you know, moving around the city. I think they don't look that great. Um, I think the bosses are a little long in the tooth. There is one that happens, and I won't say anything about it other than it's the fight that takes place outside of Aunt May's house. That fight is the length it needs to be because of the dialogue that is attached to that fight. So that character, I think, has 3 health bars because the conversation takes that long as you're fighting them. And that fight, one, I never thought I would see them in the game. Two, it's just way too long. And that translates to a lot of the other fights as well, is that they feel like there's a little too long. And they feel like some of the bosses feel like they're just altered versions of what you're doing with like the brute enemies that take a little bit more than just standard punches and kicks to do.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Um, but like it's and you know like the Mary Jane sequences are way better than last game, way better. But if they didn't exist here, I wouldn't miss them.
That's interesting.
Like
That's
that's the
interesting.
thing is like they you know because like according to the Miles Morales game she went and did training with Silver Sable and you see some of that there, but the way that she's able to tackle some of the bad guys, like you'll have Miles and Peter slugging these like Craven Hunter guys out in like 6 or 7 punches and she walks up with like a friggin' like taser gun down. She is so OP. Like the brute enemies, like there's these brute enemies in the last act. They're very, very tall. I won't say what they are. You can kill them way quicker with MJ than any of the Spider-Man.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
so funny.
Do you know what
But
though? I
no,
actually quite like the fact that she's OP because people wouldn't have expected that. Do you know what I mean? People would have
yeah,
expected the same kind of gameplay as last time, and I've seen a few of these sections. I haven't played any of them yet, but I like that they're almost making her like a human hero. Do you know what I mean? Like a yeah, she actually has power. I kind of like that. It's one thing I really like about the gameplay that I forgot to mention just now is that you can now parry attacks. I think that's a really cool change, which allows
it works.
for
It works really well.
yeah. And the other thing, maybe it's just me, and maybe I've got some weird settings on or something, but certain stuff in combat seems to almost be a little bit more automatic than it used to be. So I'll be like comboing on somebody in midair. I'll pull the next guy up. I'll combo on him. He'll fall down. If I don't pull someone else up, but I press attack, that whichever Spider-Man I am will sort of leap over to the closest person, without me having to highlight them. Whereas before, it would always have to be whoever had the little highlight line around them. Um, and yeah, so I'm not saying I don't like the game. Obviously, I haven't played enough to really like it. Is
I
that
think
that's
once
kind
you
of what it
unlock
is.
and work through the skill trees, because like each Spider-Man has its own skill tree.
Mm-hmm.
There's a skill tree for both Spider-Man that kind of affect the basic things.
Yeah.
Um, it's sort of weird, like they got rid of the suit perks. Now they
Yes.
just have suit tech,
Mm-hmm.
which I understand why they did it because you have 78 suits, and to create perks for each individual
Yeah.
ones, like that's something it is.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I think you'll get to a point where it's really good. Like I think their version of Craven is, I think, the best version of Craven ever.
Interesting.
Um, his depiction is extremely good.
I for one am looking forward to the Craven movie, which we.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know. I like Aaron Taylor Johnson, and
I
I
don't.
that's going to be an interesting one to compare. Like when I play this game and then I watch the movie, it's going to be interesting to see the differences in that depiction of that character because Craven's such a cool
Yeah.
character. And
Yeah,
what
and like
I do want to talk about, and this is a mild spoiler here because it's very early in the game, but that first scene with Craven, I really like the very first time that you see him, and
yeah,
it's in the jungle and everything. That's so cool.
yeah, no, it's great. Like even like there's one scene, like the very first scene between like Spider-Man and like Craven in like they're like close to each
Mm-hmm.
other type of scene. I didn't see that coming. It's you'll see
Mm.
when you go, but it is
Okay.
very interesting. Like it's such a good depiction because like Craven hasn't really been a major focus since 1987 with like Craven's Last Hunt
Yeah.
or Final Hunt or whatever, and that's the last time he's been kind of a major character. I mean, they had him in like Ultimate Spider-Man 16, where he was kind of like a reality show type of thing, and then he got his DNA fused with like a hyena or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Like there's all sorts of weird depictions, but Craven hasn't had the lore built up of someone like Doctor Octopus or
Yeah.
Norman Osborn.
So they can do
Like
more
I'm still
interesting
hoping,
things with him though, right? Because he hasn't got
yeah,
that lore.
like I'm really hoping that Spider-Man 3 has I think some villains that we haven't really seen in Insomniac stuff. Like I would love to see a version of Green Goblin or even Hobgoblin. Like they could skip Green Goblin, go straight into Hobgoblin. They could do that, all that kind of stuff. There's a side mission, which I won't even say which one it is, that sets up either potential amazing DLC or a big villain for the next one.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay.
there's a post-credit scene that sets up a very interesting thing, and there's two post-credit scenes. There's one between two characters, and there's one between a group of characters.
Okay, that's good to know.
And And the one with the group of characters, like there'll be some fans, like when they say a certain name, there'll be some fans that'll be like, I don't get it. And then there's fans like me that are like, oh my god, like freaking out. But
Interesting. But
yeah, you'll
what I
see when
will
you
say is
get there.
because obviously I'm going to be playing through Alan Wake 2 next. That's kind of the next thing I'm doing. And then hopefully, if I get Alan Wake 2 done by the time we record on Sunday, which I'm hoping to do, but I don't know how long the game is, so we'll see. Um,
It's about 12 hours.
but if I do get it done by then, I'll have some time before my next game to review that I can hopefully go back and kind of play through Spider Man 2. And once I've done that, I would like to do a spoiler cast episode talking about the story because, let's be real, Spider Man stories are cool, right? And they have a lot of cool characters, so we'll do that. What else have you been playing, Jeff? Because I know Spider Man 2 isn't the only thing.
Yeah, like again, I'm gonna have reviews out for My Time at Sandrock, which is the sequel to My Time at Portia or Portilla or however you want to say it, which is like another like farming kind of sim style game. It does a lot of pretty interesting things. It's like a more refined version of that game. That review is going to be out hopefully today. Um, Achilles Legend Untold is like a Diablo kind of inspired almost take on like Roman and Greek type of things with like Achilles and Hades and all these types of stuff. It plays extremely good. Um, and but the one that I think that I'll probably only talk about today is going to be a game that for me is going to be in my contention for Game of the Year.
Oh, interesting. What game was that?
And that is, and it's weird because I remember seeing the original films. I remember reading the comic books. I remember doing all that stuff. I was never a major fan of the character. And I don't know if it's just because of Giant Bomb and their Blight Club and turning Mike Minotti, who is also known as Mitch on that
Oh
program,
my god, I know what it is now.
into Robo Mitch, and then watching the RoboCop movie through their watch along and then fueling all that stuff. But RoboCop is such a freaking good game. It is imperfect for sure. Character models are whatever they are. There's some bland textures. There's some this and that. There is the signs of this game has a budget, but the RoboCop model looks perfect. Like it
Nice,
looks
nice.
exactly like it's got Peter Weller's lips like perfectly. Peter Weller's back voicing the character in like a 20-hour game. You get like all that more Peter Weller because
Fantastic.
Peter Weller, he was only RoboCop for the first two films.
Yeah.
And then you had a different guy on RoboCop 3. And then I just found out yesterday they made four other RoboCop movies that were made for TV called RoboCop Prime Directive.
Oh wow, okay.
So there's been five RoboCop movies that have not been Peter Weller, but he's been the legacy of that role. And this takes place between RoboCop 2 and 3.
Nice, nice.
So they're able to kind of play around with some stuff. But like your first bit of combat, and this was available in the demo as well too, um, and that was like you're just shooting people and like the chunks of the building are popping off like it's got terrain deformation into a certain point and it's got that dun 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 like RoboCop theme going and you're like oh my god so now every single time I'm shooting people I'm humming that pretty much. The
Brilliant.
voice acting is as bad as it needs to be because like again like it's trying to be that B movie kind of
Yeah,
RoboCop
it's
thing
actually
right.
got a purpose, right? It's almost like people don't get it. I say this about some games as like that aren't even licensed sometimes, but sometimes there genuinely is an intention to do something badly on purpose. Like
Like
it, it
RoboCop, there's one mission where like you're trying to find out where these drugs are, and you try and find this payphone, and then RoboCop goes up and dials the number, and it's like yeah, what do you want? And it's like I am wondering how I would procure some of your drugs, and like it's so funny because it's like his deadpan delivery on it, and it's like wait a minute, this is RoboCop, and like it's so funny. And then like there's this one informant called Pickles, so you hear RoboCop going like hello Pickles, like just hearing RoboCop
that's
say
funny.
some of this stuff is so funny, and like
Do you know what?
the storyline's really good.
I would love to play this game. Unfortunately, I don't think I can justify buying it at the moment. But at some point, based on what you're saying, I'm definitely going to check this game out because it
Yeah,
sounds like a
like
ton of fun.
so basically it's got this system where when you're interacting with crime and as well as the people of old Detroit, you can choose whether to uphold a law or serve the public trust. So a lady comes and says, "Hey, my son has been missing for 48 hours." And RoboCop's like, "In order for us to have a missing person thing, it has to be 72 hours." So you can either stick to that, or you can be like, "You know what? Let's look into it." Types on a computer, "Oh, your son was found dead this morning." So you serve the public trust. You didn't uphold the law because the law would have been 72 hours. So there's probably different dialogue. There is different dialogue options for that stuff. Same as like when you find a reporter who's investigating things about OCP, you can either stop her in her tracks and withhold the evidence, or you can let her play with that and see what she finds out, and it plays into the story later on.
That's cool.
Um,
That's really cool.
you'll find evidence which leads to experience gains and things like that. So you'll find stolen wallets, lost purses, documents, nuke laying around and stuff. Um, and then you've also got skill points that you put into like armor and vitality and combat and like public perception and like engineering. And so when you upload vitality to level 2, you'll find electrical boxes that you can kind of like R2D2 into and then like regain your health. So it's another way of healing yourself. There's also shields. There's like blasts and stuff. I just did a battle where I had to fight one of those big like T-Rex walkers from it, and then before that, I had to um, break into this facility and then compete for kills, and it's got a kill like thing there, and like I lost a fight against like an entire SWAT team. I
Oh
was two
wow.
kills behind. They're like, "I knew you would lose, RoboCop," and it's like, I was one guy. You were eight. Um,
That's
but
brilliant.
like it is so good. Like I've you get licensed properties, things like TMNT Return, like Revenge of Shredder or whatever, which use the property very, very well. It takes their own versions of that stuff. But this is taking RoboCop 1 and 2, the films, and making a video game based on continuing that. And I don't know if I've ever seen a licensed game get it so perfectly because like you get all the same people. Like I think RoboCop's the only actor that comes back. I don't know about the other ones. I'd have to take a look. There could be some more returning ones, but like it places its villain as a connection to the first film, especially something that's very personal to Murphy. And you can make choices throughout the game that kind of make RoboCop almost like more robotic or more human. Like when you're getting your psychiatric tests and stuff like that. Or like, what do you want me to call you, Alex? Or what do you want me to call you, Alex Murphy or RoboCop or something? And then it'll say like this person will remember that. But it's almost like old school Bethesda making a first person shooter of like RoboCop in regards to like a lot of those choices and stuff. And it's great. Like the shooting is nice. Like RoboCop moves at a decent clip. Like you can run. He doesn't take fall damage, but like his gun, like I had my gun upgraded where I don't even have to reload it. It's just infinite rounds. And his gun, like
Tell
the
me that you can
headshots,
like punch somebody into a wall
beautiful.
or something. Can you just
Yeah, you can
punch
punch them
people?
to the wall. You could pick them up and then throw them in the air or like throw them out of windows. There'd be a guy standing in a window. You can grab a computer monitor and throw it at him, and he'll like, and then right through the window. And you see him
That
bounce.
actually sounds brilliant.
Like
Like it
just try
sounds
the
really
try the
good.
demo on Steam.
I
Like
will
there's a
do.
demo on Steam, and it lets you try out the whole first chapter, and it lets you explore around old Detroit. And you'll find people like cars that are like parked against a fire hydrant, so you'll issue them out a ticket or whatever. It'll tell you how many crimes are like left in that area.
Nice.
So far I've only missed one side quest in the area that I was just at, but yeah, like it is an utterly fantastic use of the license. I don't think there will ever be a better RoboCop game, and I think that if they get to make another one of these, hopefully with Peter Weller because he's getting old, that they can kind of refine it. Like it needs a patch on Xbox for sure. Quality mode runs absolute ass. Um, like it's so bad because you'd be holding your gun or whatever in quality mode. It's just kind of like kind of moving slow and all that stuff. Like it just feels really bad. And then you're playing performance mode and you're like bang, 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 bang. Like you're just you're getting that experience. The performance mode by far. It also runs really good on the Steam Deck too. I played the
Okay.
demo.
Wow.
I played the demo on the Steam Deck and it looks good. It runs good. I think it actually looks better on the Steam Deck than it does on Xbox, but you're also dealing with the smaller
Yeah,
resolution of
yeah,
the
yeah.
screen as well
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
But no, like it's RoboCop is utterly fantastic.
Nice.
The voice acting is exactly what you want it to be. It's just as corny and cheesy and all that stuff. It's got all the characters you like, the environments, like the police station,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Like
I
it's a
love
love letter to RoboCop.
what I love about games like that, and I think it's something that, not every gamer sort of thinks about either, is a uh like a game isn't just a great game because of some technical quality and all this other amazing stuff you can do. A game can be a great game because it has a very specific vision and it nails what it is going for, even if not all of those things will be to everybody's taste. And it's almost like you said, like, what they sound like they've created is essentially a B movie video game in the best way possible, and
Yeah.
that is clearly what they wanted to do. So great for them, and it does sound like a ton of fun. Like this, it
Yeah,
sound.
this was the right.
I
Good.
was gonna say it sounds like the kind of game that I played in my younger years. Like one of my favorite games from years and years ago. There was a game on the PS2, which was a licensed Punisher game, and it's not a great
War
game,
Journal? Oh, I
but
think it's something different. Yeah. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah,
but
because they even had like a yeah, it was written by Garth Ennis, I think.
yeah, yeah, and it's just like that was cool. So I like these licensed games. I do find it interesting though that um, many of these licenses, especially things like RoboCop and King Kong and stuff like that, seem to end up at developers that don't have that much resources. And I'd love to see what some of these IPs could be with more resources behind them in a video game
Yeah,
format.
like I want these guys to make another RoboCop game for sure, but I definitely want to see it take place in like if you can have old Detroit be like as big as the map in Spider-Man 2, that'd be fantastic. I mean, that's obviously you'd have to get a different developer, and I don't know if I'd want to because these guys have nailed it so perfectly that I think that I would love to see them do that kind of stuff, but like it's just really good. The story is pretty interesting. With kind of like where I think it's going, and if it's going where I think it's going, it's borrowing a beat from one of the RoboCop made for TV movies because I watched the trailer yesterday. Um, but no, it's one of those games where it's like try the demo out, and if that doesn't sell you, then I don't think nothing will. But I mean, like it is so absolutely gory in all the right way. RoboCop's making so many jokes that are so funny. Um, but like, and it's so funny because like there's one part where you go into this arcade and you just bash the door open and you see this guy like fly back and hit the wall and drop down and die, and RoboCop just says nothing. And but it's neat. Like it's fantastic. Like they did such a good job with that game. And again, like it's one of those things where it's like it is imperfect. Like it doesn't run terribly well. Like Performance Road, it runs fairly decent. There is some little bit of slowdown. So I think it's just optimization. I think we'll get those patches.
Yeah.
Because this is the same team that made that Terminator game. They just released the Series X version. However, they're charging $12 for it. So I don't know if there's just new content
I
or
don't know.
anything for
I'm
it,
not
but
sure.
I think I am going to buy it because like I did like playing that game and I have it on Xbox One. I don't have it on Series X.
Okay. Okay.
So it's like 11.99 to upgrade it.
That's not bad. That's
Um,
not bad.
but no, it's unbelievably good and it's definitely going to be in my I think in my top 5 for the year. It is
Nice,
so
nice.
So freaking fun.
Well, remember you have more maneuverability this year because we're actually going to do a top 10 each. So we have longer lists because this year is a busy one. Uh, Before I move on to a couple of things I've been playing that I haven't spoken about yet, Jeff, have you got anything else that you want to mention?
Um, let's see here. Trying to think what else I've really played, but no, I've got a couple games that I'm going to be playing this probably like today or throughout the course of the week that I just got codes for. Um, no, I think that's pretty much it, unless something pops in my head.
Nice, okay. Well, I so obviously I told you about all the things I've been playing and reviewing: Forza Motorsport, Football Manager, Assassin's Creed Mirage, things like that. Alan Wake 2, which we'll talk more about on Sunday. But I have also I started this morning actually. Well, before I was setting up for this episode, I started Jusant, which is
Yeah, I'm actually just looking on my Xbox on my recently played thing, and I played, yeah, probably about a 45 minutes to an hour of it.
I like it so far. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
climbing's a little weird. Like once you get used to going like left trigger, right trigger, left trigger, right trigger, and all that kind of stuff. There's been a couple
As
times where
somebody
like,
as someone who played Death Stranding and was doing left trigger and right trigger for walking,
yeah,
I didn't mind it too much.
yeah, there's a couple things where it's like I didn't know that there was like a limit on like the rope, so I went along this one thing and I was like, because it tugged me back. But there's a couple little like twitchy things like where like you'll hit something and you don't hit it right, and then like you'll try to jump to somewhere and the character will like jump away instead of towards it
Yeah.
or little things. But
What I
it seems
do
pretty
like
cute so
though,
far.
what I like about it so far is it's just very unique. Like I'm not sure that I've ever played something like this where climbing is the thing. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, wasn't Gone Home? Wasn't that the whole focus of that game? And
Huh?
then you've also got like you got that one game that came out that the developer took off Steam that was using AI art and
Oh
stuff that
yeah, the
people were
one like where you had to get up the thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
going up or
That's
something. I
that's
don't know what
true.
it is, but
That's
Gone
true.
Home, as far as I know, was like a basic climbing game because like I think saw someone on Twitter saying that like Jasant almost felt like Abzu meets Gone Home,
Interesting. Interesting.
but yeah, no,
Okay.
it's pretty decent so far. I don't know if I'm gonna stick with it just because like I've got a lot
You have a
going on
lot
right
to do.
now.
Yeah. The likelihood is that I'll be the one that reviews that game if
Yeah.
either of us do because Jeff has a lot to do right now. Some stuff he can't even talk about yet. Um, but that's the way. That's the way with this website. If you haven't checked out our website, please go and do so because we do some cool stuff. We don't really write opinion pieces and things. We just write news and reviews. But this podcast is our opinion piece space. That's where we'll talk about rumors and everything here. So you know, it, and like I said, the plan for the next episode is more of a like Alan Wake 2 focused impressions, or if we have somehow both finished it by then, potentially like a full review spoiler cast alongside my written review. Um, yeah, we'll see because I want to get more into spoiler casts. I know people enjoy them, and people have asked about a few games, kind of if we were going to do spoiler casts and stuff. Um, but we will get there. We're still in the early stages of this podcast. We haven't even got an audio version yet. I do apologize for that. Hopefully the video is better this week because there were some audio sync issues on episode 2. But please, as I said before, don't forget to subscribe, like, share with us your feedback, follow us on Twitter, follow the Gaming Mix podcast on Twitter as well, which I'll link in the description of YouTube, because that is where we'll post whenever new episodes go out. Because, like I said, at the moment we don't have a set schedule in terms of release day for the episode. We do have a somewhat set schedule for our recording time, but as I get used to the video editing and things like that, which I haven't really done before, I'll get quicker with that stuff, and I'll
and you can find the podcast on the website too.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. We have a page which Jeff has sorted out that's up there, and that's an easy way for you to find it as well. So if you're not sure, then you can find it that way. But like I said, please, like seriously, please provide your feedback, because we want to make this something that people want to watch and engage with and listen to, and we will get guests on soon and things like that. There's a couple that I've been sort of like speaking to, whether that be friends in the media side of the industry, or like I know a few people obviously through my work. We will be getting guests on, and we'll be doing a lot of reviews. So the main thing is stay tuned to our website, really. That's where you want to be, analogstickgaming.com, which I'll link below to make sure you can get straight to it. And yeah, we will see you next week for an Alan Wake 2 focused episode, unless some major news happens over the next few days, and that might change everything. But until then, I'll say goodbye from me, and I'm sure it's a goodbye from Jeff as well.